Hi, I'm Beretta here, and in this tutorial I'm going to show you how to have a texture follow your geometry as if you were, I don't know, a pipe, a river, a path in general. So pretty much the same way you see it in here, you see? Where we have a texture, a ramp in this case, following the path. With this effect you can simulate shapes filling up with liquid, for instance, or you can make rivers flow according to a path. It's a pretty old technique, and I'm pretty sure there are other methods around. I'm going to do it to explain the concept in Maya first, and then we're going to do it in Unreal. So let's get started. And to begin with, I will show you the geometry I'm in. Right now, I have a geometry in here, which let's imagine it's a sort of river, zigzagging river. And if I go into the attribute editor, you see in the color I have a ramp, a V ramp in here. These are the textures, so the ramp will go vertically up. It's a shame that Maya doesn't seem to be able to display a ramp on my computer, but I'm not sure if it's my computer or Maya. So the ramp goes from black down here to white up here, despite what you see on the UV editor. Now, you know that any texture in Maya is a place to the texture, which now I animated. The place to the texture is a node that if you select allows you to translate the frame of the texture amongst other things. You see, it's just imagine that it is moving this texture you see in here. It's translating it while the UVs stay in place. The problem we see here, I already keyed the translate value of the place to the texture here. So you see that in here, as the place to the texture values are changing on the translate V, the texture is indeed scrolling, it's flowing. However, you see that it flows only in one direction, it doesn't quite follow the geometry, which is a bit of a bummer. So how do we make it follow the geometry? So the way we make it follow the geometry is, you see that now if I animate the band, the ramp going up this direction, it's going to this is going to be black, and then the black is progressively going to move up, and then in here it's going to change direction, because of course the UVs are changing direction. And in fact, you see it moves up, and then it changes direction. It's not really following the geometry. So the cheapest way I could find to make it follow the geometry is to grab the UVs and somehow straighten them a tiny bit, just so that you have either a vertical or a horizontal band. To make them look a bit straighter, you can open up the UV toolkit that you find under Tools in the UV editor, and if you go under the Unfold section, you have straighten UVs there, and you see it gives you these nice straight UVs. I will maybe make this a bit bigger. So now I will scale down the UVs so that they fall within a single quadrant, this guy here. And now you see that they are all vertical, so as the ramp will move up the space of the UV quadrant, it will actually change direction on the geometry. See that? And now I've just did what I wanted to do. So now it's following the shape of the geometry, and I can do a lot of neat effects in here. But why am I doing this? In this particular case, I'm working on a short movie where the director wants to have this red path that you see in here on this model, and he wants to see this red path. He wants to see it at times transparent, at times visible, so he wants to break a bit this thing. And also, as an animator, I would like to be able to animate the appearance of the path in such a way that I see the path unfolding. It's not as if I want to animate it on and with visibility on and off. I want to have a nicer effect up there. So we are going to address two issues which are necessary for us to solve the short movie here. So first of all, in the UV texture editor, I made sure that the UVs for this path were straight. They're not perfectly straight, you see, but I didn't really have time or wanted to even spend time in there. It's going to be fairly small on screen. But if I wanted to straighten them, I would do the same thing. I would select the UVs, I will go on there, Unfold in the UV toolkit, and I will click on Straighten Shell. And there you go, now the shell is straightened. Well, not really. Let me try again. I will straighten UVs, sorry, not shell. We'll wait a little bit. And now my shell is straight. And if I apply the same material that I have on this shell that I have on that sort of small square river down there, if I apply it to the path that I have in there, what will happen hopefully is that the texture will, you see what happens there. I can simulate liquid filling up a pipe, for instance, or I could use this thing to drive the visibility of a path. Okay, so not too bad, not too bad. So now we need to do this thing in Unreal though, because in Maya we understood the concept, and now we are going to apply this concept in Unreal, because that's where the animation needs to be applied. So I'm going to export these as an FBX. I do not really need to bake the animation of it, and plus the ramp is not going to pass over to Unreal as an FBX. Unreal doesn't use ramps the way Maya does. As a matter of fact, I think Unreal doesn't even have ramps. So I will call this thing path. There you go, export it. And then I will go into Unreal. Actually, before going into Unreal, we could just bake this ramp. You can make a ramp to use in Unreal, either in Photoshop or by converting it from Maya. I just don't want to open another software, so I'll convert it from Maya, but really it's just as fast, if not faster, to do it in Photoshop, sorry. So to bake a ramp, you need to select the object you want to bake it from. You want to select the ramp in the hypershade in Maya, and then you go, I think it was edit, and convert file texture. You see that? So I can click on there on the options, and I can enable anti-alias, and as a background mode I extend the edge color. I disable fill texture seams, and I export the whole range of the UVs. Then as a resolution 1024 1024, and as a file format we're going to use PNG. As I said, you can do this thing in Photoshop. It's much more low tech there. So I click on convert. I wait a little bit. There you go, and you see I have a new file in here. I want to click on it to view it, to see if it's converted, and there you go. That's my ramp there. So I now have the FBX and I have the ramp, which you will find in the source images folder of Maya. If you don't know where to find it after the exporting is done, in the script editor of Maya, Maya will tell you where to find the file. You see here in source images. So let's move on. So into Unreal, now we are going to import the path FBX. There you go. I'm going to drop it into the scene just to see how it looks like. And I've scaled it up just to see it a bit more visible in the scene. So now let's create a material for this one. So I had to press pause because I think that it would be nice to see the final effect before even moving forward here again. So let's say I have a material on this geometry, and I will drop in the final material. So the director wanted some gaps in the path, and we have them. And he also wanted this thing to the path to grow up as the animation goes on. So in fact we can do that, and you see we can, using the growth parameter, we can have the path grow up towards the top. That's exactly what the director wanted. So we have the two specs that the director outlined completely respected, and with these values we can also remove the missing bits. So for instance, let me reset these guys. There you go. So now I have the path as it is, and you see I can make it go both ways, for instance, or I could even make it go in a single direction. Doesn't matter, but it's a good way to simulate some fluids going into a pipe, for instance. This could be fun. And I don't really need to have even the gaps in there. And now you see that without the gaps on, I can start growing the path from the bottom, and that's it. I could invert the map and do the opposite, make it grow from the top and go down. It's a very handy way to simulate, as I said, fluids in a pipe, or to simulate something growing, like a path that we need to follow or something like that. I'm not going to make it game friendly, because the purpose of this project we are doing is offline rendering done in Unreal, so I'm not going to do this so that it's optimized for games. So let's get started with this shader, and as the first thing I'm going to create a new shader, a new material, and this is going to be my I will call this path underscore M, stands for path material. I'm going to apply this to the object in the scene, and I'm going to start working on it. I will open it up in the editor, so that's my path there. I'm going to keep the geometry there and the editor here so that we see what I'm doing in the meantime. And so first of all, I think I need my ramp. To have the ramp in your scene in Unreal, you simply have to drag it in. So if I go and find wherever is it that I stored my ramp, sorry, I have a bunch of software open. There you go. You just need to find the PNG file we exported from Maya, drop it there in Unreal, and in here you will find that you have the ramp. You could potentially, I think, control the ramp even from here. I just couldn't find a way to do it from within the material editor. If you know a way, let me know, because I'm no expert with Unreal. I just know a couple of things. So there you go. So now we have the ramp. Now we want this ramp to be visible on screen, so I'm going to drag it onto the material, connect it to the base color, and perhaps even to the emissive, so it's a bit clearer, and I'm going to save this thing. There you go, and now you see that I have the ramp in there. So I think as a first thing, perhaps I want to learn how to control the visibility of this piece of geometry, to make this piece of geometry grow up, for instance, from nothing. So I'm going to grab my ramp in there, and I think the simplest way I could find for this was to go back to the good old lerp, the linear interpolate node, and to create, sorry, this is not what I need, and to create a black vector there, and then I'm going to lerp this ramp against the or with the black image there, the black solid, let's call it that way. And now in here I would need the an alpha. So in practice I'm just showing the black picture in there in the alpha. So for the alpha I'm going to create a vector 1, so I hold down 1 on my keyboard, click on the workspace, and I'm going to connect that to the alpha. And now this vector I'm going to convert to parameter, because I'm going to use a material instance in here. I just find that working without those is a bit slow in terms of shading. So this is going to be our growth parameter there. And if I save this thing, now I want to create a material instance so that I can tweak it in real time in the viewport. So I'm going to find path M there, right click, and I'm going to create a material instance. This will be, I will leave the default name. I'm not too fussy about the naming now. So I can drag that onto the onto the geometry. Just want to check that you see it's there. And now if I open up the material instance on my screen there, I will keep that open as well so that you see what I'm doing there. Now I can enable the growth parameter, and you see that now I can already control the growth of that color. So it was pretty easy, in fact. Now the thing is, I would like this ramp to control visibility, right? So let's suppose, and I will create a free vector, and a vector free, and I will make this thing red. There you go. Let's suppose that the color, that the base color and emissive of my shader is red, and that I want this thing to control I want my ramp to control the opacity. I will go into the material and I will set the blend mode to masked. Then, I mean, the blend mode you set on this material greatly depends on your need. Okay, I mean, in my case, I think mask will work for my needs, but have a look at the documentation there. And the lerp will go into the opacity mask. I'm going to save this thing. So now I should see the red up there, and progressively will become transparent at the bottom if I did everything correctly. You see that? So there you go. So now if I go and operate the growth value there, you see I can grow this thing from the top. There you go. Now the problem is that I don't really want to go from the top. I need it because the director needs that. I need to start from the bottom and go up. So I should invert. If I inverted this ramp, then I would be fine, right? I could do it in Maya to invert the ramp and then export again, but it's a bit overkill knowing that if I create, I don't know, a 1 minus node here, that will have the effect of inverting a map. So I will just 1 minus it, and I will save. There you go. And now I will set the growth to 0 here just to see if it works. And now as I grow up, you see that I am indeed controlling the growth of this thing. So this is not bad. I mean, we already reached one of the specs, which means we will be able to make this path go along this sort of buildings that we have in the model and reach the top, which is what we need for the short movie. The other thing the director wanted, and it was that every now and then the path should interrupt. We shouldn't be seeing it because it stands to represent that there are missing bits in the path. So let's see how to do that. So I'm pretty sure there are millions of ways to do this. So probably mine is not the best one. Because I'm not an Unreal expert, so to speak. So I will use a super cheap device in here. So I will use the same texture that I have in here. And if I look at it, I am pretty sure that I could, I don't know, increase the contrast of this texture so that it's black and white. So some areas will be clearly black, some areas will be clearly white with much less gradient going on there. And then I think I could tile that, and that would give me some sort of dashed effect, for which every time there is a black bit in there, the path will be invisible, and when there is a white bit, the path will be visible. So to tile something in Unreal, as far as I know, you have to input texture coordinate, and that's the tiling node. And if I plug it into the UVs, and I will use this now to drive the opacity. I mean, I know this network works, so I'm not going to touch it for now. I'm going to in fact detach it. So now I'm going to see what happens in here. I don't expect much to happen now. Let's see, there you go. You see it's going to be visible when the white on the top side is present and invisible when the black is present. So if I increase vertical tiling to, I don't know, 13, I expect this to become some sort of dashed line. There you go. So you see it's a dashed line. So now the problem is that it's very, again, time consuming to change this tiling, and plus I want to do it in the material instance. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a parameter drive that texture coordinates. So I'm going to create a single parameter there, a single value there, and convert it to a parameter. I'm going to call this parameter, let's say, gaps 1. So that's the first of the gaps. And then I'm going to create also a multiply, because I want to multiply the number of the number I have on the tiling by this parameter, so that I can decide in the material instance how many of these gaps I want to have. So I think in the tiling I will keep 1 as a vertical tiling, and in the parameter as a default I will keep 1. Oops, sorry. There you go. If I now hit save, there you go, then the material instance show up in there. And now see what I can do there. I can also do this kind of effect, which is kind of cool, in fact, if you think of it. It's another thing that could have some use in some other scenarios. So this lets me, if you think of it, this lets me break up that path. The problem being that now it's a bit too even, and I think there are too many gaps in there. So I need to have a bit more, a bit less gaps, so to speak. So what I can do again in here is I can again use the same texture, and again the same network here, and I'm going to blend the two so that I will have two different ratios of gaps in there. This is going to be gaps 2, and I'm going to blend them. And in order to blend them, I will use a screen blending mode. A screen blending mode is a blending mode that keeps the whites and essentially makes the black transparent. I mean, this is a super non-scientific explanation, but let's see how it works. So I will look for blend screen. There you go, and I will blend one with another, and I will plug that in into the opacity. There you go, I hit apply. So now let's see what happens in my shader. There you go, and now I have another section with the gaps, and you see now I can add more gaps. So in practice I'm putting more white into the texture, and you see that now that gives me sort of irregular gaps in there. So in fact I'm pretty sure this is more or less what the director wanted. So some gaps in there, possibly not even, and then the growth of the texture there. So I'm going to perhaps make sure that the last bit of the growth is a bit more continuous there. There you go, something like this. And now I need to reintroduce the growth parameter, which as you see is disconnected from my network. So what I'm going to do there is I'm going to probably multiply it over. So if I'm going to multiply the lerp with the blend screen, I'm going to multiply this map, which is, let's look at it in emissions so that you understand it a bit better, because I find it very difficult at times to visualize the textures, but if you see them in the emissive color and the base color, it becomes a lot clearer. So whenever there is a black in there, there's going to be a gap. So, and when there is white, there's going to be a visible red line. I believe that the reason why we don't get feathering in there is because I chose a masked material, but I'm no expert, so maybe I'm wrong there. And so in here, if you really wanted to see a bit more contrast, you could use a node like cheap contrast there to contrast this map and see a bit better what goes on. So I will just to give you an example, I will do it here. Come on, there you go. And I will use I will make this a parameter so that I can play with the contrast. Well, so this is gap contrast. I'm going to save. There you go, and here I'm going to enable it, and I'm going to increase the contrast. And you see it's going to remove the feathering, and this is more or less this is also a good way, in fact, if I think of it, to control opacity, to reduce some of the feathering, or so. We should use a shader that supports that, of course. So now I'm going to save and see what happens there. There you go. So with the contrast, we have the ability to control, well, to see really what this thing will look like on the material in the end, not really to control it, in my opinion. But it's just a way for me to visualize things a bit better in these cases. So now we were saying we want to make sure we animate the growth as well. We can control that as well. So I will go on multiply, and I'm going to multiply the cheap contrast or the blend screen with the lerp there. So there you go. So hopefully that should work. So I'm going to plug it into the emissive color and base color, and also the opacity masks that we see both the colors in preview and the opacity. And I'm going to save this thing. Now the growth should show in the material instance up there, and now I should be able, you see, to make this thing grow up and still have the gaps that I needed. Not too bad, I would say. Now if I need the color, I can put in any color I need. In the case of this short movie, that color is going to be probably red, and the opacity mask is going to stay the same. I'm going to save. And now that's my material, and that means that while playing the animation, I will be able to animate the growth this way. There you go. And that's about it, guys. That is that easy, I think. So have fun.